Thank you, everybody, for your patience on that first reading. It was my fault. I had prepared the first reading from Hosea, because there's two choices, and then right before the service, right before I saw that someone maliciously changed it on me, and I wasn't prepared to include that, and so my partner Darryl, who was the lecturer at the 8 o'clock, he had the sheets there, and Wendy, you did a beautiful job of reading it, you know. So thank you. It was kind of fun watching you adapt, but it was just really, but you did a beautiful, beautiful job. And you know, hearing you talk about this camping trip, 4 days in the wilderness, huh? Camping on the ground. There's the tarantulas. There's the alligators. There's all. Give me a nice hotel room with a queen bed, obviously, and on, you know, so just, I go on. So anyway, that's that. But I'm sure it's going to be fun. Anyway, I digress. If I were to try to present you a theme for today, I was looking at all three of the readings, and it would be, for me, I was trying to see what it was speaking to me, what it was drawing me to. Now, if I were to study that in a couple of weeks, it may be a little bit different. But as I was looking at it today, looking at the theme, for me, as it was going throughout, is trying to find a path of how one lives one life in uncertain times. So let's start with Hosea. We don't know a lot about it. He lived about in the 8th century before Christ. He's known as, one of the minor prophets. I don't know why, they just called him one of the minor prophets. His ministry was something like 30 years. And he was at a very tumultuous time when things were not going well for the Holy Land. And in fact, they had 6 different kings that ruled them, all of them bad, and all of them assassinated. So you wouldn't want to be a king there, I'm just saying. So anyways, this is going on. He and God one day are having a talk. And Hosea says, you know, I want to get married. Okay, yeah. And he says, I got the perfect person. Her name is Gomer. Now, when I heard that name, I never associated with a woman. I did associate it, however, with Gomer Pyle. Yes, absolutely. So I associated, and it was hard for me to shift that because, I mean, who names their kid Gomer? Man or woman? It just doesn't happen anymore outside of Gomer Pyle. So anyway, I said, okay, pay attention. What's going on? Well, God warned her that she was not going to be faithful. She was not going to be a good wife. So what happens is, God's right. Surprise. So, and then they have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and they're just as bad as their mom. Well, she goes off and she does her thing. And then she comes back, I'm so sorry, I just really bad. And okay, I'll take you back because I really, really love you. Okay. So they're good for a while, and then she goes off again. And then comes back, I really, really, okay, I really love you, I'll take you back. And this goes on and on. And so what Homer does, what Hosea does, is he takes that experience with his family, and he puts that into his readings because he speaks in terms of all that the people have done. As awful as some of it is, God's love is constant. And that's important. And as I was reflecting on that, I remembered several years ago, and I think I shared this with you at some point, I was engaged with the boot camp, which is a prison. Prison was for male offenders under 30, chemically dependent, convicted felons under 30 with no more than 10 years to serve. And I was doing a religious service for them one evening. And there's maybe about 50 of these young men sitting there. The hand goes up. And he said to me, do you think God could ever forgive us for all that we've done? It surprised me, and I had to think a little bit. And I said, and I don't expect anybody to respond to any of this I'm about to ask, but just keep it in your mind. I said to them, these very young men, how many of you guys got kids? And the hands went up. And I said, how many of you with your kids would think that they would do stuff you wouldn't like? Yeah. How many of you think that your kids, as they're growing up, would do things that you really, what are they doing? Makes you, yeah. How many of you think, especially when your kids get to be teenagers or older and they marry the person you don't think is right for them, and you go, gosh, what are they doing with their lives? Well, all I gave them. Yeah. How many of you think you could stop loving your kids? And they say, well, no. There you have it. I think sometimes God looks at us and says, what on earth are they doing? What are they doing with their lives and to each other? But stop loving us can't happen. It's impossible. And that's, in essence, what Hosea tries to point out. So let's go to the gospel for a minute. Interesting story. Some of the translations don't say that if somebody came up and asked him, they say rabbi. They called him rabbi. Now, the rabbi is the perfect one to ask to dispute who gets what. Tell my brother to give me what's due me. I thought of my dad. My dad was a wonderful man, great storyteller, a terrific person, but he hated confrontation of any kind. Oh, he would, no. So what did he do if something had to be done? He always went to my mother. You tell them I said. And my mother would go, well, Wally said. Well, so that got him off the hook, but he could never do it, but he sent it. So I got to thinking about this. Tell my brother to do the right thing. Now, is Jesus going to get involved with that? Do you want to get involved with that? No. Jesus decides, let's use this as a teaching occasion. And what he really says, so this guy who's got these bins of grain, going to build bigger stacks and put them all in, and you think, that's not a bad thing. He's preparing for the future, yes. The issue is that Jesus is pointing out is that he was so focused on one thing that that's all he thought about. Making sure that there was more of more, and that's all. So there's nothing wrong with us preparing for our retirement, having insurance, and if we have to go to the hospital or the doctor, going to the dentist, having insurance for those kinds of things. But when they take on a life of their own, then they have their own breath and their own demands. Yeah, they got a payoff, but they demand a great deal, so you keep those in mind, but they're not our focus. Now to put that into a form of where do I go from here? Let's go to the people of Colossae, Asia Minor. Paul hadn't been there, but he knows what's going on. It's a young community. People here are keeping in mind their lifestyle is very different than ours. Their lifespan is very short. No reading, no writing, no TV, no cell phones. How did they do it? And none of that. No communication whatsoever. Most of them couldn't even read and write. They were simple, very simple farmers in a very simple community that didn't have a ton of resources. So what they did is they had a whole system of gods that they followed. And when they did, they knew in the springtime, when you had this festival and prayed this piece, and you did that, you worshiped this God and you had this festival, that's when you planted. And if you did it right, they would start to grow, because then the next God came along and you prayed to that God, and then after everything, if it went right, then the rains would come. And then they prayed for good weather, another God, and then the harvest, and all of that, and to be able to get through just that year. Okay, that's their plan, and it works most of the time. And if it doesn't work, who messed up? Somebody didn't do this right. So now you got a group of people who are Christians moving in. They're a new faith, kind of held suspect. They look a lot like a cult, and they're only worshiping one God. What's this all about? So they're going to watch him, but they got a plan. They've got a plan that if something goes wrong, it's their fault, because they abandoned all of the gods in favor of this one. So Paul writes this community. They're scared. You can understand that. They're frightened. They're not sure what's going to happen. So he writes to them, here's what you need to do. Stay focused on what you have to do. Keep in mind these other things going on. And pay attention to all of that, but at the same time follow your path. And here are some things to keep in mind. It was a lot, wasn't it? It was a lot that's in that whole section for today. Keep that all in mind. Plus, do all of this. Don't do this and do that. So I went back to my training, and as you know, many of you know, I'm a chemical dependency counselor working for Hazel and Betty Ford, and recovering addict myself. And when I would have people coming into treatment, and also family members coming in for the family program, they get very confused. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to handle all of this? What are you here supposed to do? Now, taking a look at our society, look what's going on. We've got guns going off all the time, people getting shot and killed for reasons we don't even know if there's a reason. Does there have to be a reason, we ask ourselves? We've got the pandemic coming and going. Now monkeypox is here as well. We've got a war going on in another country. We've got the president just tested again for positive for COVID. Stuff just keeps going on. And how do you keep a sense of what do I do and how do I handle all of this? Here's what we would tell people in treatment, because people, especially in early recovery, don't have a lot of coping skills. Because the moment we become chemically dependent, we stop growing. And so everything you deal with on a day-to-day basis, we haven't. So when all of a sudden it starts happening to us, it all comes at the same speed, and we don't just react, we overreact. Because everything is a big deal. It gets better, but it takes a while. So here's what we tell them. When in doubt, do the next right thing. That's it. If you don't know what to do, if it all seems to overwhelm you, just do the next right thing. And then do the next right thing. And the next right thing. And pretty soon the whole thing will be the right thing. Like a simple example, change the first reading. The next right thing. She did it, and she did a beautiful job. And just after that, doing the next right thing, change that because the psalm was the same. And although it may have felt embarrassing, and I don't know that, but if it did feel embarrassing, she did it. And that's what all we need to. It was a beautiful example of just bringing something very practical down to earth, just doing the next right thing. And that's all that really God speaks of us, taking in all the things, the threads of what begin with Hosea, down to the people of Colossae, to Jesus, and to us in our present day. And for me, that gives me a sense of hope, of purpose, and also of direction. Amen.